Wow. I've heard it. I've seen it. Saw it. Bruce Lee, iconic martial artist whose fame really didn't come to after his death. Like, I don't know if Bruce seen this happening, but he did not propel himself to superstardom until after his demise. Because the scenario was always this with Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was always trying to prove his worth and prove to Hollywood that he was this guy. He could be the draw. Martial arts could be something that could be sold and not just looked at as some off brand type of invention. So, going through his entire layout of his career, Bruce Lee made a living when he was here in the United States. When he had his martial arts gym, he had to fight his own Chinese counterparts who had their own, who only wanted to teach the Chinese. He was the first. He was the first Chinaman to ever teach to anyone that he wanted to. He wasn't bound by any restrictions, and under the Hong Kong government on how they can dictate who does what as far as tradition. So all of their martial arts at that time was basically looked on as their secret. You could not have a professional dojo of business and train outsiders. There was no law saying that you could train, that you couldn't turn down a student. Wasn't no equal opportunity there for students. You pick who you wanted to train, and those you didn't bother with. So when Bruce did this, there was a challenge made, and we all know the story. He beat the guy, so he won the right to challenge. Now, other martial artists scoffed at Bruce Lee's arrogance. They felt Bruce was very arrogant in the way he was scoffing at other traditions of martial arts. But at first, he was never like this. So when other people came along and were, going through these different phases of when he was in California and he was having lunch with a lot of these guys, and he would talk philosophy and talk about life. And it was something they wouldn't expect out of Bruce Lee. They thought Bruce Lee was going to be more of the flamboyant, pushing the envelope type of guy. Now in Hong Kong, those guys, the martial arts guys over there, are saying Bruce Lee school is, just not, you know, receptive of the way we do things here. And people didn't know Bruce had students and was teaching the Wing Chun before he even started with Juke King Do. When he came up with the idea for Juke King Do, he was making notes and everything. The Dragon movie will kind of distract you a little bit and make you think that once he got hurt, that's when he decided to start putting his notes down and everything else in his life. But here's the true nature of it. Bruce Lee was a hot commodity as far as the martial arts industry. So when Mr. Parker would put on these tournaments, he would say, I need Bruce Lee. because Ed Parker. I keep saying Lee. Ed Parker was somebody who wanted to put these shows on and let the world get to see Bruce Lee and demonstrate these. But mostly it looked like, you know, Ed Parker was American, but you guys don't know. He's an American Kempo fighter. One of the best that you people had ever seen. And when he came connected with Bruce, Bruce was showing him all his moves and doing all these things here. And the 60s and 70s, June Reed and Ed Parker and all these guys were they would all be in these same having dinner and hanging out and stuff. And at that time, Bruce, a lot of his friends, because he was dating Linda, who was a white girl, it was a lot of white people who did not like this. So Bruce hung out more with the blacks. And Ed was one of the few martial artists who were white, didn't really care what he did at all. And he brought up the fact that Bruce Lee had brought up the fact to him that, a lot of a Caucasian men that look like you, Ed, they come to our country and they date and they marry Chinese women, they fly over here, but if a Asian man marry a white woman, they're upset. you know. He's like, I didn't misuse her, I didn't treat her, I made her my wife. That is a greater risk of me in my own country than he would ever get over here in the United States. No one even questions it. Or her. So, with that being said, Bruce felt a lot of his, things he was always fighting, whether it was inside or outside of a ring. So, when this was all taking place, Bruce had a whole different philosophy towards life of like everybody got to get along. We're all human beings. And he had a philosophy and a way of talking to people that they forget whatever they were taught, and it breaks them down. And to the point where they say, well, this guy is not what they made him out to be. He's not really arrogant. He's really passionate about what he believes. So that changed a lot of people's thinking when dealing with him. So Ed Parker started putting him in these, when he had these martial arts tournaments, he would bring Bruce Lee in and let Bruce come in and demonstrate some of the techniques and things he was talking about as far as martial arts and how things were dated and needed to change, and these ways don't work. And it's you talking about somebody who's been doing a craft and an art for 30, 40 years, and you hear this guy that comes along saying it doesn't work, you're gonna be offended. Because you have a sensei, you have a master, whoever was teaching you all of these old traditions that's been going on for hundreds of years, and you come along and tell me that it doesn't work. Well, let's just see. So when this whole thing broke down, right, everything started to come out the pores. Um, you had different scenarios happening. People were angry, people were upset, some people wanted to fight. Bruce Lee, and he's putting on these demos. And word was getting around to a young up and coming martial artist. And this young up and coming martial artist who went by the name of Chuck Norris. Chuckster. I grew up with Chuck Norris like a lot of you guys probably did. I didn't grow up with Bruce. Bruce was dead before I was even born. But Chuck was alive. Now, Chuck Ray Norris, or Carlos. A lot of people thought his name was Charles because they called him Chuck, but no, his name is Carlos. Now, Chuck Norris, known as the American martial artist, he was in the Air Force in the United States, won championships, so he found his own school of martial arts, which was like jujitsu, judo. He was a black belt in all these different arts of mostly wrestling, hand-to-hand combat. And he heard about this Bruce Lee guy, and he wasn't impressed. You know, the lot he heard the arrogance, the flamboyantness, and heard about this guy, and he wanted to be, and the martial arts guy. And he was in the show, The Green Hornet, and he does all this. So he's like, oh, this guy's just an acrobatic. He wouldn't, this guy probably, you know, have all these theories. They wouldn't work out, or they wouldn't work in tournament for him. So everybody wanted to bring these two together because Bruce went to China, Hong Kong, and movie producer told him, "You're going to be the biggest thing in the world here." Then he started making his films over in the United States. I mean, in China. So his movies are very popular now. Now he has a backing, a foundation. So Bruce is back to a position where he feels, like this is great. And then he went to have a dinner with a couple of friends, and Chuck Norris is there at this dinner. And they really hit it off. Like they really gotten cool, but Bruce has heard the things Charles Chuck Norris had said about him and was talking about his theory. So Bruce didn't look as enthused when he first got there, but they worked past that, man. They were like really, really, really good as far as like relationship, the way they spoke to each other, the way they talked martial arts. Bruce really like loved everything about Chuck Norris. He loved the fact that Chuck was a martial artist. Like this wasn't an act for him. He really studied the arts and was willing to listen. Whether he believed him or not, Chuck was believable. And him and Bruce would argue a lot over who was, the better, like as far as traditional martial arts versus tournament. And they were like, okay. When Chuck was there at it was some event, because Chuck was a champion and in tournament form. And he would tell Bruce all the time, like if you guys were, in a tournament or something like that, Bruce scoffed it at these tournaments and felt like there's no way, in these tournaments, like, and he would say, well, Bruce, you've never competed in a tournament. You can't judge it something you don't know about. And they would have these arguments over this, but not arguments, just regular discussions. So Chuck is looking to basically get into movies. He's still competing at the time. And Bruce, who was all about elevating his film. And the Chinese Connection, you know, it was a really huge film. Most people in the United States don't know anything about it. You know, it was a really good, great film of expression for the Chinese, who were told by a lot of Japanese people it was a lot of racism with the Japanese versus Chinese. And he exploited that the way how Japanese people look down upon Chinese. And we never knew this thing existed. We still didn't know what was going on when we watched the film. We just wanted to see the martial arts and the karate. People, but in China, it was huge, huge film. The Chinese Connection is probably one of his best films that he ever done. More than Into the Dragon. This was probably one of his best films that he had put together that had the impact and the meaning that was in the film. So when he did The Way of the Dragon, you know, the one with, or Return of the Dragon, with him and Chuck Norris, he wanted to have it at the stadium. He filmed it in Rome in the Coliseum where people, gladiators, used to fight. They used to put in a pit and people used to come there and watch. He said, "We and you have a match there. No one's there to witness it. Just a cat who doesn't have any care in the world. Them to have this fight there, two gladiators, two different styles, two different art forms, but very proud martial artists have a fair fight. No interference, no nothing. A fair fight." And Bruce, man, the way him and Chuck worked on this match was incredible. Because it was a lot of like, you know, we might need to make contact with one another. You know, so that's what it was about. Like, we might have to actually do contact with one another. So we might need to go ahead and do this. And, you know, like some blows have to land and some won't, you know, but it was like with control. And some of the moves was naturally instinctively blocked. Oh, Bruce would always work with artists and work with him on moves and what would you do if this was to happen and how would you counter, and Bruce was didn't like to compete in tournaments but said that he could, but it's hard to do the type of martial arts Bruce was saying in tournament form because Bruce martial arts is based on you're not you're not going to actually practice this and hit, and you know martial arts used to stop and enable the person that's trying to hurt you from hurting you anymore, meaning that the objectivity of it is to disarm or to harm to the point where they can't hurt you no more. They stop. Either they stop because you're gonna, or you done broke something to the point where they can't. So this is the point Bruce was trying to make to Chuck. Chuck, what you guys are doing is good for points. My martial arts isn't for points. That's why he didn't really believe in fighting like that. Not in that form that Chuck was boasting about so much. It's like you don't really get it. Bruce isn't in it for this. So it wasn't to talk down on Chuck's accomplishments as a champion fighter, but these two never had a problem. A lot of people think, oh, because of that movie, and that was just really good to sell it to you guys. Bruce and Chuck never had a problem. Now, Bruce and Chuck only had an issue, and Chuck only had an issue with Bruce when Bruce was no longer here. And it wasn't because of Bruce. It was because Bruce became the whole face of martial arts. Period. And when you're starting your career, because Chuck went to make movies and he made a lot of them, they needed a martial arts star that they can bank, and he was white. So they like, okay, great. Because they've been trying to sell it with the David Carradine and all this, but this is a guy who could actually fight, and Chuck Norris. Now everybody wants to get behind the death of Bruce Lee because it was so mysterious, and so he was so young, and the way it happened, it was like so much mystery around it. And we only saw him after, most of us only seen him after he was already deceased from the film. All these amazing things he's doing, we're like, there's no way that could happen to Bruce Lee. So the controversy always was there. The Chinese killed him. The Chinese did this. They did that. They took him out. They promised they were going to kill him, and they killed him. And the same thing we saw arise with Tupac Shakur. We loved Tupac so much, we wouldn't fathom the idea of it just happened. You know, they got an incident. It had to be something extra. But what Chuck was fighting was the legacy of Bruce Lee. That's what he was that just got Chuck to the end. You know, these interviewers who never knew him, and Chuck who knew him just got to him. You know, it just bothered him, and all this mystery about it. You know, and Bruce is a walking miracle. You guys don't understand that. Bruce was lifting so much weight that he basically damaged all the nerves near in his back. He damaged some nerves in his back, some discs, really bad, to the point where he couldn't even walk. The discs were bulging so badly that Bruce, you know, in the Dragon movie, they show you where Bruce Lee actually got kicked, and all that never happened. I mean, that was so falsified. I don't even know why they did it. They just needed an action scene to sell the movie. But in real life, it was a little bit more traumatizing as he just couldn't move. And for Bruce Lee not to be able to move, mentally, that was a huge damaging point. And a lot of mental pressure on Bruce. And a lot of people didn't know, they said this is what started Bruce Lee to smoking cigarettes, to calm down a lot, and to keep from, whenever he's enraged about something, he was smoking. But I'm like, Bruce was smoking earlier in his years. Like when he was doing the couple of movies over in Hong Kong and stuff, that's when he was picking up the smoking thing to relax. But this did not play a part in his demise. Because of this injury, he was taking back medication, and it was accidental because Bruce did not know. While he was taking these back medicines for his back, because his back was stiffening up, he hadn't had a lot of rest. The medicine that he was taking for his back is very powerful. And the reason he had a headache is because he wasn't getting any sleep. He was working continuously doing 2 films at the same time. He was doing Into the Dragon and he was doing The Game of Death. And he stopped filming The Game of Death to do Into the Dragon. So some of the scenes you've seen in Into the Dragon was done before he started. I mean, Game of Death, he started that. You've seen a lot of those scenes before he even did the actual script part, the actual story and the acting to it. And the Game of Death would have been a great movie, you know, had they had Bruce Lee there to act out the actual story. And it was a story he written out that we've seen in the video game Kung Fu, where he goes up to stairs to another level, then he beats up some ancillary guys, on the video game until you get to a boss at the end of the stage. So, but here you just fight the bosses. Each stage, you go up the stairs to be another boss, another martial artist. So the Game of Death was going to be like the ultimate martial arts film, where every level was another boss till you got to the main boss at the top. And the Game of Death made a lot of money too. A lot of people didn't know because of the demise of Bruce and the fact that he had done the action scene. He had done all the fighting scenes and got that choreographed and finished before they even went to do the actual story. So while he was doing that, he stopped that and started doing Enter the Dragon. Once they finished Enter the Dragon and it pressed, it wrapped, and they were doing edits and cuts, and he's making sure everything is done right. He's stressing over that, and he's going back and forth about doing the Game of Death film, and it's just a chance to blow martial arts up on a big scale. Bruce ended up taking medication for his back, and when he took the medication for his back, he was tired, he laid down, and he couldn't go to sleep. He was restless because he had drank so much coffee and caffeine to keep himself awake. So had a whole bunch of coffee. He was awake. He couldn't go to sleep now, even though his body was fatigued with all the caffeine in his system. So he's at a friend's house when this happens, and she gave him a tea to help relax him. This herbal tea. So he has this caffeine. He has this herbal tea. He has this strong back medicine for his back. Because if Bruce wasn't in the condition and shape he was in, he would never be able to be physically able to walk again. He was a walking miracle with the type of nerve damage he had in his back. He basically willed his body to walk again, to be strong again, and and in these instances, he was just completely, massively strong to be so small. Now, what made Bruce more, I would say, vulnerable in this situation, he's got these 3 things going on, and then she gave him 2 aspirins to help him sleep. He takes these 2 aspirins, amidst that he already taken the back pills, got caffeine, got this herbal tea in his system. He lays down, and his body had an allergic reaction to one of the medicines that's in the mixed with the aspirin and the back pills that he's taking. His body has an allergic reaction to it. So into the brain, when these medicines combined, it became lethal to Bruce because he never knew he was allergic to some of these medicines, and he did, and it caused his brain to seize. So he had a seizure while he was asleep. So his brain seized while he was asleep and killed him in his sleep. So that's how he died. No conspiracy, nobody plotted, nobody set a plan to take him down. That's how it happened. Now, back to the Chuck Norris story. Chuck, who had was getting ready to come out with some films of his own, and he was still going back to fight martial arts tournament. After Bruce's death, Enter the Dragon comes out, and it is the biggest martial arts movie ever made at the time. It was put martial arts on a level to the fact that studios went to Chuck Norris like, here's a big check. We want you in the next martial arts film. Bruce Lee is gone. We need you. You're an American martial arts hero. Here you go. And for 30, 40 plus years, Bruce Lee's been dead for like, what, 40 years? Almost 45 years, Bruce Lee has been dead. He's been dead for 45 years. People have come and gone within this lifetime in shorter distances and age limits. And people have come and left this earth for less of time. But Bruce Lee is known by your children. He's known by your cousins, your aunties, your uncles. Everybody know Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is in commercials. Bruce Lee is everywhere. And for 45 years, Bruce Lee, if you say martial arts, you're going to say Bruce Lee. And that's 45 years after his death. No other martial artist, a lot of people don't even know who Chuck Norris is. So you say, oh, Texas Walker? I know Texas Walker Ranger. That he had to make his identity through this. And through all his career in film, when he's doing his Delta Force and all of his martial arts movies, the promotion, everybody's asking him about Bruce Lee. So imagine your entire career of acting and working, you're in the shadow of Bruce Lee throughout the entire time. Bruce Lee is the shadow that is over you. His legacy. They made him a martyr, and he became bigger than life. After his death, he ascended way to the skies and became everything that everybody's like, wow, this guy's incredible. Bruce Lee. My goodness. Chuck became envious. He became bitter when people would bring up Bruce Lee, to the fact that it got to a point at the end of his career where he needed to talk about Bruce Lee. So people be interested, in what he was doing. And this was not the life for Chuck. Chuck's like, ticked. Like, look, I've got a larger vocabulary of movies. I've done some with great martial artists, and there were other great martial artists in there. Chuck, and to say he's the greatest martial artist who would win between me and Bruce, it's no way of knowing that. And Bruce would kill Chuck Norris. He had to read and listen to all of this his entire career. So I understand how Chuck would feel. But he did not hate Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee didn't hate him, and they were putting Chuck above Bruce. At that time, Bruce was Bruce. And Chuck was just an American martial arts fighter who had no acting ability basically at all, not known in that world, and he cared about tournament and competing at that time. So for them, Hollywood wasn't really looking at Chuck Norris at the time. So it's only when Bruce came and did what he did with Chuck did this really elevate his thing once Bruce wasn't there anymore. And they saw that Enter the Dragon was a huge success, and martial arts was blowing up all over the world. Whether black, white, Mexican, Hispanic, everybody wanted to do karate. Well, at that time, I mean, it's not like Chuck, didn't know that Bruce had to face racism a lot. Bruce went through it a lot, just like the blacks did. So that's why Bruce and the black guys, the African Americans, whatever you want to call us, we gravitated more to him because we understood what he was going to have to go through and what he was going through. And when he talking about, yeah, this dude did this and that, and the brother understands it completely. That's why him and Robert Kelly got along a lot. They didn't hang out a lot, but they had a lot of deep conversations that he couldn't have with Chuck. Black Belt Jones and his somatic universe of this. So when him and Bruce got to talk, knowing Enter the Dragon and all these things, and they got the chance to speak about racism, because there was a lot of it, even on the set, and Bruce cut his hand, so, and had to get stitches because the guy didn't want to drop the doggone bottle. When you see when Bruce actually really kicks him in the chest and he goes flying into those 2, 3 guys, that's real. That was no joke. So hopefully this explains everything about Chuck and everything about Bruce. Both are great martial artists. Chuck was a little bitter about it. He might tell you not. He came up with his own Chuck Kundo. That's something he came out with, his own school of fighting. Which is a mix between jujitsu and, actually just regular judo martial artist. And Chuck has lived his life as a martial artist throughout his entire career. See, a martial artist is someone who continuously stays the path for it's a lifetime journey. And that's the thing. His martial art rankings know no bounds as far as belts and medals and awards. He learned martial arts in Korea, for those who want to know. Like I told you, he studied Kempo, he studied a lot of different arts, but mostly his was judo. His was mostly a Brazilian judo type of style of grappling and wrestling. But Chuck wanted to come and mix a lot of different martial arts, just like Bruce did. Uh, and that's why he would always get offended when people ask him, well, who would win between you and Bruce? It's like, well, Bruce never fought in a tournament. So we wouldn't, there's no way, I've always was in competition in tournaments. And, it was very weird. But I was glad to see Chuck. Both men have a star on the Walk of Fame. Chuck still had a very successful career, still having a successful career. And, at 79, Chuck is still moving along. A big old Chuck way. So, with that being said, I'm out. Hopefully you guys love this video and you give it a like. You subscribe to the page. If you want to donate to the page, you can click the link in the description box. Hit that link in the Streamlab and go ahead and leave us a message and we'll get back to you on it. And also, if you want to Cash App is better. Name's Carcino on the Cash App. I'm out.